Hello, good evening, and welcome back to Poem Praise 2. I do thank you for tuning in, and I did let you know that the next extraordinary African American is going to be Langston Hughes. He's a writer during the time period of 1902 to 1967, and it goes like this. Langston Hughes' father left home shortly after Langston's birth in Joplin, Missouri. Now, as a result, Hughes spent much of his childhood with his grandmother, Mary Langston. Mary's first husband was Lewis Sheridan Leary, an abolitionist, an abolitionist who was killed while fighting at Harper's Ferry. All Mary had to remember him by was the shawl he was wearing when he died. Often she would wrap herself in the blood-stained, bullet-riddled cloth and tell young Langston stories about the lives of Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and other freedom fighters. Now, this is mother to son. Well, son, I tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpets on the floor, bare. But all the time, I's been a climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So, boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps, 'cause you find it's kind of hard. Don't you fall now, for I's still going, honey. I's still climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair. Sometimes at night, she would tenderly wrap the shawl around him as he slept. From these childhood memories came the strong African American pride that later flowed through all of Hughes' writing. Now, at 13, Hughes started reading the poetry of Claude McKay, Carl Sandburg, and Walt Whitman. Following their example, he began to compose his own poetry. And at 19, his poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, was published in The Crisis, one of the most influential African American magazines in the country. In it, he affirms his link to his African heritage. Originally scribbled on the back of an old envelope, the poem was to become one of his most famous. Yeah, writer. He on the back of an envelope, so he just had to find some paper and had to get that down. So certainly our writers and our poets certainly understand what he was going through in regards to, it might get slippery. You got to write it down. Don't want to lose it. All right. Now, in 1921, Hughes enrolled at Columbia University in New York City. Although he did well at Columbia, he was most interested in Harlem, where African American music, theater, art, and literature were flourishing during the Harlem Renaissance. Leaving college after only 1 year, he took several menial jobs and then signed on as a sailor on an old freighter. Life on a board ship suited Hughes. He wrote poem after poem. After traveling to Africa and Europe, he jumped ship and lived for a while in Paris, where he spent hours listening to the black musicians who had moved there to work. Back in the United States, he continued to frequent the nightclubs where African American musicians performed and to visit storefront churches. Hughes was caught up in the rhythms of the sermons, spirituals, and hymns, like the waves of the sea coming one after another. So is the undertow of black music with its rhythm that never betrays you. Its strength like the beat of the human heart. Its humor and its rooted power. In 1924, Hughes moved to Washington, D.C., where he got a job as a busboy at the Wardman Park Hotel, where he found that poet Vachel Lindsay was staying at the Wardman. He arranged to show him some of his poems. Lindsay was so impressed that he read Hughes' poems to an audience that night. The response was overwhelming, and Hughes was invited to do his own reading. Hughes' first book of poetry, The Weary Blues, was published in 1926. The same year, he enrolled at Lincoln University near Philadelphia, graduating in 1929. Now, while in school, he found time to write poetry. Some African American critics felt his second book, published in 1927, glorified immorality and showed African Americans in a bad light. Hughes defended himself, saying, "I have the right to portray any side of Negro life. I wish to. Every ugly poem I write is a protest against the ugliness it pictures." Gonna let that sink in for a moment. I'll repeat that again. I have the right to portray any side of Negro life I wish to. Every ugly poem I write is a protest against the ugliness it pictures. Now, Hughes' first novel, Not Without Laughter, 1930, was an immediate success. During this time, Hughes traveled widely and spent a year in Russia. After returning home, he wrote a number of short stories that were collected in The Ways of White Folks, 1934. Now, 3 years later, as a newspaper correspondent, Hughes covered the Spanish Civil War. When he returned home, he established a Harlem Suitcase Theater. Its opening production, his own one-act play, Don't You Want to Be Free, was a huge success. He later founded 2 other theaters, one in Los Angeles and one in Chicago. In 1934, Hughes began writing a regular news column in which he presented the shrewd, humorous views of African American man named Jesse B. Semple. The Simple Stories, later collected into 5 books, are now considered to be among his best work. In all of his writings, Hughes celebrated ordinary African American working people, He liked them, felt at ease with them, and respected them. His work is noticeable for both its quality and quantity. Over the years, he wrote not only poetry, but also plays, novels, children books, short stories, histories, biographies, radio, and TV scripts, and his own autobiography, known as the Poet Laureate. I don't know if I said that correctly, but I'll spell it as being Laureate of Harlem. Hughes is primarily considered a poet, often humorous, sometimes militant, sometimes militant, excuse me on that word, occasionally subdued. His writings mirrored his observations, his beliefs, and most of all, his hopes. I certainly like to thank you for tuning in for Poem Praise 2 and listening in on the information of Langston Hughes for the time period of 1902 to 1967 of the writer. I will give you a preview of who's coming up next in our Extraordinary African Americans. Is Alan Leroy Locke, educator, a writer, philosopher. During the time period of 1885 to 1954. So certainly stay tuned to Poem Praise 2, and I'll be hollering at y'all a little bit later. All right. Certainly be blessed, y'all. All righty. Till next time. Later, y'all.